Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to talk to you and with you without slides for change. And let me say, first of all, that the recommended reading the organizers suggested to me were fascinating. And the text on what Etica has done and has accomplished and on the way towards these results resonated with me strongly for two reasons. First is that we are in the middle of a review of the present data protection framework in Europe, which is designed to make this body of law, this fundamental right, work more effective in practice. And there is a lot of opportunity in the review to bring in some of the thoughts the project has delivered. Now, the second reason is that I've been involved recently in a similar exercise in the legal field, thinking about the law of the future. It's organized by the Hague Institute of International Law, and the results will be input for a conference mid this year. Thinking what the law would be in, let's say, 2030, and what issues. That is an exercise which is very similar to how would you deal with these issues. My think piece raised two basic things. That is an increase of complexity. And ICT is a major factor in making things more efficient, but also we see an increasing complexity, layers, different distinctions. And your analysis confirms that. And we were looking into the question of how to organize responsibility in such complex environments, how to allocate responsibility, how to organize responsibility and change complicated relationships, and how to distribute incentives so that this responsibility in the best possible ways. I won't go into globalization, but that was also a relevant aspect, and they interacted. So this is why this strongly resonated, and I want to make a few points in reply to these points, also showing where some of the bridges and some of the, say, the openings are. First is the very concept of personal data as it has been developed in the data protection legal development and now confirmed in the Lisbon Treaty in a fundamental right to the protection of personal data. Leaving aside details which are not so interesting today, I want to highlight two dimensions of the concept. As it's been coined in the Council of Europe and then developed later on, and it's identical in the present frameworks, and I do not expect any change actually. That is, it refers to any data relating to an individual, and that individual should be identifiable. Now, the relating to dimension is often neglected and not well understood. It covers the obvious that information is about someone, but it also very much, and this is how it's been explained in a recent document, deals with information that has an impact on individuals, either intended or as a result of action. Of course, it should be an individualized impact, but that is a dimension of the concept which is extremely relevant in the context of much of the ICT phenomena which you have identified and further evaluated. The identifiability also is often understood as identification in a full social sense, formal sense, name, birth date, address, face, etc. But the Article 29 group emphasized this as it is this singling out capacity when information is designed to single out an individual, even if we do not know all the details of the person, then it could very well be personal data. It seems to me that these two aspects have their relevance in the context of ethical thinking. But there is a second point of a trend which I see developing increasingly. That is, we have traditionally framed this in the form of an individual right, indeed an individual fundamental right now. And I think that individual rights in a more technical sense, the right of access, the right to challenge, the right of correction, etc., continue to be very important. But at the same time, increasingly, it becomes clear that this is a job far too big to handle by individuals, certainly acting alone. So there is an increasing emphasis, I would think, in what if the individual does not decide? What if there is no consent? What rules do apply or should apply by default? In other words, and this translates into, this is legalese, the 6 legal bases for lawful data processing. 1 is consent, the other 5 are balancing tests with the criterion that it should be necessary in that particular context. But also, we now see a trend that this default and the rules for lawful processing should be built in terms of privacy by design. So an increasing structural answer in the context of the development of the individual right to data protection. The third point, which I think is important, that the counterpart of rights, the responsibility of the key actors in data protection legalese, the controllers, that responsibility is in practice very often understood as responsibility at the end. If something goes wrong, who is liable? And that is a very unproductive way of thinking. Increasingly now we see a trend that this is a responsibility in the beginning. That is, the controller should do something to make sure that, reasonably speaking, things go right. And that discussion is framed in the context of developing accountability models. It is designed to activate responsibility and to ensure building in of safeguards in practice. I think this is crucial in the context of the developments which you have together sketched in the project. Now there is a fourth element which is also important and is rather worrying, that increasingly ICT is being used in ways that there are sort of presumptions underlying what is happening. There are decisions, more or less automatic, based on profiles. The way these profiles are built is a separate story, but there is this presumption that somebody is a risk or is an attractive target, and if it's a risk, he or she, it should be eliminated or ignored or looked at more carefully. That is a feature in benign environments where we do not worry about them. It's also an increasing feature in more risky environments. And last week I have criticized this in the context of the EU PNR system, which is about collecting data on all airline passengers with a view to doing risk analysis. The way in which this is happening and the way in which this is developing into our societies is I think, rather worrying. And the more invisible the ICT becomes, and this was a point you made this morning, the more interlinked this becomes and the more implicit it becomes, the net effect of these developments is rather worrying. Let me close with a thought where I see that early warning in terms of early warning of developments could be particularly useful of its own merit, not only in, say, the way you describe it in the results of the project and perhaps the bridges I have suggested, but also in the context of evaluation of research projects. The Commission, with these huge funds, has a particular role in this context, not only evaluating whether a particular project is worth starting, but also looking at what it is delivering. We've seen a number of examples where in the security research domain, where the mere hinting of a possible result is creating such an appetite of applying the results in practice that the thinking whether it is a good idea to do this is actually overlooked. And if it's not overlooked, it is underestimated, is given too little time, and we say, we need to do this in a pilot phase, and we'll evaluate it later on, and then we'll see whether this works, etc., etc. So I think we need to invest in pushing back, in creating more time for reflection, and that will be extremely welcome in my view. Thank you.